vice-ministro de Educação em Brasília. Maria Helena e eu visitamos as escolas KIPP, uma escola KIPP em Nova York e no Bronx, faz alguns anos. Essa foi a segunda vez que eu visitei e fiquei muito impressionado com a focalização dos alunos, com até uma regra monástica de silêncio nos corredores. Era muito impressionante ver esses meninos, como estavam, me lembra, o ano passado fui para a China e no interior da China eu visitei uma sala de aula. Era uma visita meio privilegiada, não é fácil viajar, mas eu estava em uma sala de aula, visitei uma sala de aula com 70 alunos na sala. E você imagina que um gringo entrando na sala de aula no Rio de São Paulo, com uma câmera, que todo mundo estaria clamorando para atenção. Nenhum menino, nesse momento, levantou a cabeça de seu trabalho para reconhecer isso. Este tipo de disciplina que eu assisti nas escolas que me impressionou muito, porque sabemos das dificuldades que temos nas escolas públicas, principalmente nessas regiões metropolitanas, especialmente em São Paulo. Eu acho que quando eu comparo o sistema de ensino público no Brasil como um organismo que tem suas coronárias incutidas, obstruídos. E quando isso acontece, a solução é um bypass. Para mim, o modelo das escolas KIPP é um tipo de bypass que precisa do ensino público no Brasil. E os Estados Unidos, que tem muitos problemas no ensino público, mas tem muitas experiências, muitas iniciativas de reforma, muitas experiências novas, tem muitos charter schools que são proibidos pela legislação brasileira. Então, realmente precisamos do nosso esforço e Mike vai contar deste esforço. Mike, por favor.
Thank you, Norman, for hosting me here in Brazil, and thank you all for having me in your beautiful country. I'm a rookie. I've been here for about 15 hours now, so far it's a great visit. I'm excited to tell you kind of the KIPP story, and from the KIPP story there are lessons learned that we believe apply not just to our children, but all the other children in the U.S. and the children here in Brazil as well. Some lessons maybe not translate, but others do. So I'm excited just to share our ideas. I'm also here because we realize we don't have all the answers and we have a lot to learn as well. So I'm also excited to hear your thoughts and questions when I finish as well. One quick disclaimer, as you can tell, KIPP does create severe hair loss, so you have to be very careful as you touch. So when I start talking about KIPP in the US, I actually first start with talking about Africa, and I talk about the Maasai. That's a tribe in Africa that has an interesting ritual when their warriors travel between the villages. When they pass one another, the way they greet each other. In tradition, the first warrior turns to the second warrior and asks, "And how are the children?" And the second warrior will respond, "All the children are well." I love that, because the right focus, the right expectations from a group of people. It's a focus on the well-being of their children, and it's the expectation of the well-being of all their children. And it's something that the Maasai have put into the very fabric of society of what they do 50 times a day. Good morning, good afternoon, how are you doing, and how are the children? All the children are well. If we ask that question, where I'm from, the United States, here in Brazil, how are the children? The honest answer would be, right, so-so. Some of the children are doing fine, but not nearly enough. Right? And that's what we have to work on. And so I have a few slides that I just printed out just to show you, to give you first the American context of what we've been working on. That first picture you have is the pipeline of how our children do in the United States. That top row shows all the kids in the United States. This is how we've been doing for a while now. 83% graduate high school, secondary school. 62% enter the universities. 31% wind up graduating with a 4-year degree. Now, I'm going to stop the slide. I need to do a quick infomercial on why at KIPP we are so focused on university prep for all of our children. Because some people will argue universities are not for every child. And we have very strong opinions on that statement. I have 3 heartfelt responses and 1 pragmatic response. My heartfelt responses are most people who argue that universities are not for every child, most of those people have university degrees. So I find that hypocritical. Secondly, the Great Recession that the United States is still coming out of in lots of cities and states, where the unemployment rate was 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15% unemployment. It never hit 5% unemployment for people with university degrees. Third, if I go anywhere in the United States, and this week I'll learn if it's true here in Brazil as well, if I go anywhere in the United States and ask 6, 7-year-old children, what do you want to be when you grow up? Most of what you hear young children say require university degrees to do those things. So if we're going to help our young children achieve their hopes, dreams, aspirations, we have to be aiming at the universities. Now with that said, pragmatically, I agree. Universities are not for every child. The way we think about it, though, is the skills to go to the universities are for every child. And it's not for the education system to decide who goes and who doesn't. Our job as educators should be to educate all the children so that when they're done with their 12, 13, 14, 15 years of education, all the doors of opportunity are open to them. If they want to go to a 4-year university, they can. If they want to go to a 2-year technical school or trade school, they can. If they want to join the military, they can. If they want to be the next Bill Gates entrepreneur, they can. If they want to sit on their mom's couch, good luck. Right? But all those doors of opportunity are going to open to them, so they're going to choose to do what they want to do. And if they don't go through a door, it's not because it was locked, it's because they just didn't choose it. So that's why we believe, ultimately, KIPP stands for KnowledgeIs Power Program. We do believe knowledge is power. And we believe in giving our kids a great education. But ultimately, what we're focused on is giving our children the freedom to do in this world what they want to do. So that's my infomercial on why we're so focused on universities. So going back here, what's interesting about that pipeline for U.S. is 31% of our adults have a university degree. We haven't gotten worse in the United States. We've flatlined for 50 years. The number hasn't moved. What's actually interesting is, if you look at everyone in the United States age 45 and older, at 31%, we lead the world by far. The problem is, age 23 to 43, we're 16th in the world at 31% and dropping like a rock. So it's not necessarily that we've gotten worse, it's that the rest of the world is starting to figure out how to teach better, how to teach more of the population than what we have. So the way we look at this, we want to ultimately move that 31%. And by the way, there's different reasons. One, I'm going to talk in a minute about the social justice reason why I think it's important to move that number. Beyond that, business leaders are starting to struggle with saying that they can't find enough qualified applicants for their jobs. And even McKinsey, 3 years ago, put pencil to paper. And because of that 31% pipeline, with only 31%, that's the equivalent of $1 trillion annual recession in the United States. So before the election that happened earlier in the month, before Barack Obama beat Mitt Romney, before we figure out who's going to be our next leaders in Congress, before we work on fiscal policy and monetary policy to help our economy, every year we start $1 trillion, $1 trillion US dollars in the hole, simply because of our lack of great education for all of our children. So whether it's a social justice reason, a national security reason, a financial reason, there's lots of reasons to work on education. So if we're going to move that number, the next thing to do is, so where in the United States should we work? If you unpack it by socioeconomic level, that second row are the top quartile income children in the United States. And then the bottom row are the bottom quartile income children in the United States. These are not the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor. These are quartiles. These are tens of millions of children in these rows. If you look at that second row, 93% graduate high school, 90% start universities, 82% graduate from universities. Are there leaks in that pipeline for our top quartile kids? Yes. Can we make significant game-changing progress there? Not really, because those numbers are already very high. You compare that with the bottom quartile in the country, 70% graduate high school, 41% enter universities, less than 10% graduate from universities. That, my friends, is our achievement gap in the United States. Yes, we can look at international exams, we can look at NAEP scores and PISA scores, we can look at dropout rates. Those are leading indicators. As far as I'm concerned, the ultimate achievement gap is what happens when we're done educating our children, what opportunities do they have? And unfortunately, in 2012 in the United States, in the land of the free, the home of the brave, where we like to talk about this American dream, unfortunately, depending on the time and place of your birth, you either have an 82% chance or an 8% chance of doing what you want to do in this world. That for us is a social justice problem. That should not be that way. If you look at the next page, unfortunately I could not get all the data, I couldn't get it broken down by economic levels, but just collectively as a country, your total pipeline, 41% of your children achieving a secondary education, 11% achieving tertiary degree or higher. So we are in similar, misery enjoys company. And so we are in similar situations. And I have a feeling if you unpack your number the way you unpack our numbers, you would see a similar achievement gap between upper income children and lower income children, and the opportunities with lower income children to vastly change that. Now, there's all kinds of things we need to do to change this. We can start talking about how we train teachers, how we train principals, how we have testing, what influence the unions have, how we elect our governance models, how to use technology, how we use curriculum, what are the standards. I mean, there's 100 things we can work on to improve the system. I'd argue that while all those are important to do, and all those are fixable, some are much harder than others, but they're all ultimately fixable, I'd argue none of those are the starting point. The starting point is, what do we believe is possible? Because far too many people look at that first page and look at the second page and will say, this is how it is, that you cannot educate low-income children at the same levels as upper-income children. Now, I might be preaching to the choir in this room, and we might not believe in here, but I know society believes it. And to illustrate that point, I want to do a quick mental exercise with all of you. I want you to picture in your head 2 schools. Picture in your head here in Sao Paulo, the most elite college, university, preparatory school you know. Public, private, doesn't matter. Now picture in your head a typical school in the slums. Okay? Let's start at the elite university prep school. A child there graduates and goes to universities. They all do. A kid there drops out of school. What happened? ¿Qué pasó? We're all whispering in carpool line. Now go to the school in the slums. A kid there drops out of school. Half do. More than half in schools. Right? A kid there graduates, goes to universities, is successful in universities, go on in this world, is successful in the world. Friends, we make a movie about that child. So it just shows at societal level, we still hold different beliefs and expectations for our children, depending on the time and place of their birth. And that's ultimately what we have to prove is not right. At KIPP, and I hope others will join this room, we believe that every child from every community can succeed in school and can succeed in life, as well as every other child from every other community. And because they can do it, therefore, the ultimate variable at play of whether they do it or not is not on them, it's on the adults in their lives, both their families as well as their teachers in their school. And that we have the influence to make an impact, good, bad, or neutral, on the future of that child. So that's what, these conditions are what Dave Lev and I discovered 20 years ago in 1992 when I started teaching with Teach for America in the United States, which is a program like you have ensino here in Brazil now, where we recruit recent college graduates who are not education majors to go make a 2-year commitment to go teach in low-income communities and help underserved children get a better education. And Dave Lev and I were both placed in Houston as elementary teachers. And like all first-year teachers, we were absolutely horrible. We were the worst teachers on the planet in our first year. But we latched on to the master teachers in our building, and we watched them teach, and we watched them how they rewarded the kids and how they disciplined the kids. And like all good teachers, we begged, borrowed, and stole the good ideas. You know, teachers aren't made in ed schools. Teachers are made as apprenticeships by out in the field, watching other master teachers work their craft, and you learn from them. And that is what we did. And by the first year, we were definitely not great teachers yet, but we were competent teachers. And our upper elementary kids, our 10, 11-year-old children, they love coming to the classroom, they love learning, they love talking what career they want to have, what college they want to go to. So we naively thought, we've done it. On the K-12 assembly line, we gave our kids a great 5th grade year. Off they go on to bigger and better in secondary school, which is where they're going the next year. And that very naive bubble burst about the second week into our second year of teaching, when our former children, who are now in middle school, they would call us up at night. And those phone calls would go like this: Mr. Feinberg, can you give me homework? Like, why do I need to give you homework? We don't get any homework. How come you don't get any homework? The teachers won't let us take the books home. What? How come they don't let you take the books home? They say we'll ruin the books. And that went on for a few months, till about by Christmas time, our well-behaved, intelligent, enthusiastic former students were now skipping just as many classes, doing just as many drugs, joining just as many gangs, becoming just as many parents as the other kids in secondary school. And in the community where I was teaching and where Dave was teaching, it was nothing new. Again, the stats we just talked about is happening to most of the kids. But for Dave and myself, the problem had now lots of faces, lots of names, which made it unacceptable. And it was unacceptable. When it first started happening, though, we fell into the trap. The way we responded to it is we marched ourselves right into the teacher's lounge, and we started doing this. It was easy to blame the teachers in the secondary school, blame the principal in the secondary school, blame the head of the school system, blame the kids, blame their parents, blame the community, blame society, blame everyone. We were excellent finger pointers, right? And we did that until we had this epiphany one night in late 1993 that all that finger pointing was just contributing to the problem. It wasn't adding to a solution. And if we wanted to add to the solution, there was one last important finger point we had to do. We had to look in the mirror, and we had to point the finger this way. We realized that we had our children for a whole entire year, and we could not honestly say we gave them all the academic skills, all the intellectual habits, all the qualities of character that they would need to do well in secondary school, have the momentum continue to go to universities and beyond and be successful. We didn't come close to giving them all that. So we sat down at the computer all night long. We put on YouTube, Achtung Baby, repeat play. And by about 5 o'clock in the morning, we had the KnowledgeIs Power Program, KIPP, on the computer screen. And the premise of KIPP back then in late 1993, as it is 19 years later in 2012, is there are no shortcuts. That there's no quick, easy, magical bullet that's gonna give kids all these academic and intellectual character skills. That at the end of the day was about rolling up your sleeves and working really hard at it. And at the time, we were still naive. We thought we could fix this in one bang-up year. We were still thinking as 5th grade teachers, what can we do in our classroom to make a bigger impact? So we decided to create the KnowledgeIs Power Program where we were going to motivate children to come to school from 7:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They come for 4 hours on Saturdays. They come for an extra month in the summer. We give them 2 hours of homework every single night. We figured that everybody should do it. And it worked. I mean, well, first off, we had an interesting time trying to convince the school system to let us do this. We wanted to be an official sanctioned program in the school system because we had to raise some extra money for it. We were being paid as school system teachers. We were going to work the extra hours for free. Quick disclaimer, I don't know about here in Brazil, but in the United States, KIPP does not have a monopoly on hardworking, great teachers. Those hours sound, I know, very long, but there's no school in the United States that doesn't have a teacher in his or her classroom at 7 in the morning and a teacher in his or her classroom at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The only difference is they're there because they just love what they're doing, they love the kids, they work with them before school, they work with them after school. The only difference at KIPP is all the teachers are there at 7, all the teachers are there at 5. It's a teacher's colony. It's people who love teachers, who are sick and tired of being isolated in that one classroom that's doing good work, and they feel like they're on an island surrounded in a sea of chaos. They want to be with other teachers who are working just as hard as them. So we were trying to convince the school system to let us do this, and because we were doing these hours, we had to raise some extra money. We were having the kids come on Saturdays, and all the kids we were working with they're all low-income kids by federal government standards. So the federal government gives them breakfast and lunch, but there's no Saturday program, so we had to raise money for a Saturday lunch. We wanted to raise some money to take our kids on some extra field trips as rewards. And so we wanted to be an officially sanctioned Houston school system program, where we were teaching in Houston, Texas. And at first, we would go in and bless you. We would meet with the leaders of the school system, and we would get grilled. And the questions would be like this: well, Mike and Dave, this KIPP thing you want to do, we're deciding whether or not you're going to let you do it. Is this ed reform? If they want to be able to check the box. And we said, well, sure it's ed reform. And they asked us, okay, well, if it's ed reform, what's the new curriculum? And we answered, there's no new curriculum. We figured lots of very smart people here in the school system and the state have written good curriculum. We're supposed to make sure the kids learn it. And that confused them. And so they asked, if there's no new curriculum, how can this be ed reform? We said, well, the kids will come to school at 7:30 in the morning. And they got their notes. Okay, now we know what you're doing. You're doing a before-school program. Like, no. We're going to keep them all the way until 5 o'clock. Oh, never mind. You're doing an after-school program. You couldn't get them to understand, look, we're just lengthening the school day. Yes, more time for reading, more time for writing, more time for math, without sacrificing science, history, fine arts, athletics. It's actually not a pressure cooker, it's a pressure release. More time to get everything done. And at the simplest level, all we've really done is taking your traditional school day, a before-school program, an after-school program, a weekend program, a summer program, and just went school. Instead of having the kids go from different community organization to community organization during the day, week, and year in school, why not have it all happen under one dedicated roof, with one dedicated faculty, with one dedicated mission, with one dedicated set of culture and values the kids are learning all day long. So in the meantime, the school system, they didn't still get it, and they said, we think you're crazy, but if you can find 50 children who are crazy enough to do this, we'll let you do it. And so we went door to door at night and on the weekends in the neighborhood where I was teaching, and we sat down with kids and parents. I mean, literally, we were like traveling salesmen. Literally, it would be like this. Good evening. Do you have a 9-year-old at home? Right? We're teachers from the local school. That's how the conversations used to start. When we started recruiting in New York, we would knock on the door would open up a little bit, the chain would be on the door. They'd look at us and say, what church are you from? Right? So that, and we would say, no, we're teachers. We'd get a strange look, but then we'd open up the door and let us in. And for just about every single child and parent, so the first time they had teachers at their kitchen table in their living room. And we sat down, and we listened to their hopes, dreams, aspirations for their children, and the children told us that themselves. And now we told them how lucky you are because now you have a choice. Most kids don't choose their school, or in their school don't choose what teacher they're going to have. So you now are lucky enough to have a choice. You can go to a regular 5th grade classroom, or you can come to KIPP. And we're here to tell you about what this KIPP choice is, and you can choose if you make it or not. When we were done, we had this paper, this commitment excellence form, that we signed, the parents signed, and the kids signed, agreeing to the hours of behavior expectations. We didn't test any kids. We didn't look at past report cards. We didn't talk to the past teachers. Just if they signed, if they had the ganas, if they had the desire to sign up, that was the enrollment form. We signed up 50 kids. We had, as you can imagine, and again, at boiling down to the simplest level, argue that we did have a great year because any school in the world that's doing a great job, public, private, Catholic, anything, I argue they have 2 basic ingredients. They have great teaching and more of it. And that's basically what we were giving. I still don't think in that 3rd year we were great teachers yet, but we were very good teachers on our way to working hard to becoming great. And with all that time in the classroom, our kids learned a lot. And so we got them into the special magnet programs around the school system that was for gifted and talented kids, even though most of our kids came in with other labels like special ed and bilingual and low income and at risk. They were now considered gifted and talented, and they could go to the better secondary schools around the city. But even there, we realized none of our kids were going to be pushed to keep doing well in school the way we were pushing them. And so we went back to the school system and asked, could we change our program into a school? Still starting with 5th grade, with 10-year-olds, but can we keep them throughout the secondary school years? And this was right before there were charter schools in Texas. And so the school system still said, we don't understand what you're doing, so no, you can't do it. In the meantime, New York City heard about us, where in New York City, they've been doing choice schools within schools for the last 40 years. In New York City, you have a 5-story school building. Every floor will be a different school. And so they were going to let us start a choice public school in the South Bronx, right near Yankee Stadium. And when Houston found out we were going to go to New York and do this, they turned around and gave us an offer to do the same thing in Houston. So being young and dumb, Dave and I took both offers. So in 1995, I stayed in Houston and started KIPP Academy in a Latino hub of the city, the immigrant hub of the city. Half my kids were Mexican, half my kids were Central American. And Dave moved back to New York to start his school in the South Bronx. We both started with 10-year-olds, but we grew it 1 year at a time until by 1999, we had these 5th to 8th grade, 10-year-old to 14-year-old schools, each with about 300 kids. And if I can brag about my original children for a minute, when we got to full size, and by the way, along the way, we became charter schools, because charter schools is a way to have, in the United States, have more freedom over curriculum, over hiring teachers, over how you manage the budget. So we evolved into charter schools. And when I got to full size, my children in Houston had the highest math scores of any middle school in the entire state of Texas, which is 5 million children. And that's with a population that was 100% low income, or actually 90% low income, 100% minority, which was making a lot of people around the state of Texas scratch their head and rethink potential. And what Dave and his teachers did in New York, I think, is even more remarkable. And so with all that children's success, people started visiting, people started noticing, people wanted to learn what we were doing. And the 60 Minutes news program in the United States came and did a feature on our kids in the fall of 1999. And that's kind of how the floodgates opened up. So 60 Minutes came the very next morning, late morning, I'm running around the office doing my 50 things. Back then I was running the school in Houston. I was the 5th grade math teacher. I was the 7th grade basketball coach. I was a custodian. I was a lunch lady. I was a bus driver. I was doing a little bit of everything. Running around, the phone rings. And it's the school system calling from California. And all I heard on the phone was, Mike, we saw that program on TV last night. We want to order 15 KIPPs for next year, please. And I remember I stopped and went, did you watch? So let me go check inventory. Right? We'll ship them right out to you. Right? It was frustrating that KIPP was being pegged as the latest and greatest magic bullet, right? Which, you know, education reform in the United States, and I think I've learned around the world, it looks like 5-year-olds playing soccer, right? Everyone's chasing the ball around the field, right? So it's a huge mob of kids chasing the ball. That's what ed reform is like. People latch on to think there's this one idea that's gonna, if I can just pull this one lever, it's gonna magically fix everything. And we all chase that one idea, and then decide that's not the good idea, let's do a different one. And then for the next year, we chase another idea. And in the late 90s, that's what people were thinking about KIPP, which was frustrating. But there was an opportunity as well. And for the first time in 6 years, people stopped looking at us as two young, crazy white guys and thought maybe there's some method to the madness going on that would be good for them to take to their other school as well. And so being Teach for All alumni, like Teach for America, like Encina here, and believing that mission of one day all children should have the opportunity to get an excellent education, we started thinking, how do we leverage the success of this little tiny school in Houston and this little tiny school in New York City? How do we leverage the success to the greater good? And we asked people for advice and talked to different people, and we wound up getting in touch with Don and Doris Fisher, the founders of the Gap and Old Navy clothing stores in Banana Republic. And they were looking to put a large amount of money into public education. And together we formed a new partnership, and in 2000 we created a new foundation, for lack of a better name, called the KIPP Foundation. I wanted to call it the No Shortcuts Foundation, but Don Fisher knew more about brand names than me. He said, call it KIPP, and we said, yes sir. And so in 2000 we launched the KIPP Foundation, and the KIPP Foundation had two goals. The first was we were going to scour the United States to find other amazing teachers who had a fire in their belly to do this work, who also were coming in at 7, staying until 5, want to focus their kids on not just passing a test in that grade level, but going to the universities. And we wanted to find them and say, here's your opportunity to take your impact from your classroom and make it school-wide and start your own school of your dreams. And then when we found them, we were going to train them for a whole year on how to plan, open, and run their own KIPP-like school. And we were going to do that training in a business school, because we were finding teachers that were already great teachers. They already knew education pedagogy. They already knew very well how to lead and manage children. What they did not know how to do was how to lead and manage adults. And if only the adults were as easy as the children, as we all know. So, and who teaches leadership and management of adults? Unfortunately, not the ed schools. Who writes the books on this? The business school professors. So we actually were taking people that already had education down pat, and we're giving them business school training to teach them how to be leaders and great leaders and managers. And we would train them for a whole year. And then while we were training them, the KIPP Foundation was also basically giving birth to these new public schools. In most states in the United States, the United States is basically 50 different countries when it comes to our education system. Each state has their own set of rules and laws. Very little is decided at the federal level. And so in most states, the way you start a new public school is through charter schools. And so we started a lot of charter schools. But in some places, we still contracted with local school systems to start schools within schools as well. And so we were set, and then to do that, we would set up a school, we would find the first facility, we would recruit a local school board, and we would set up a new NGO. Because we didn't want to run the schools from all over the country. We wanted to have them be locally governed. But then we would license the KIPP name. And as long as these schools were being KIPP-like, which I'll explain in a minute, and as long as our quality control was, as long as we could sign off on who the school leader was, the principal, they got to be a KIPP school. And so that's what we started doing in 2000. And the main thing I said there is that we were training people how to plan out to run their own KIPP-like school. One thing that was really dumb luck was when we started replicating KIPP, because we had two schools, not one, the important question we had to ask was which one do we replicate? Because after 6 years of evolution, KIPP Houston and KIPP New York no longer look like the exact same school. You could tell they were in the same family, but they weren't twins. They were cousins. And so we had to look at what's in the genetic code of these schools that made them both incredibly successful with low-income kids, even though they evolved into two distinct schools. And that's where we came with our 5 pillars. This will make the schools KIPP-like. We decided all of our schools that have these 5 basic things. But from there, beyond that, we weren't going to create any more twins. We were going to create more cousins, right? And so, and these 5 pillars, to this day, what we think are the key ingredients, not just for a KIPP school, but any school in the world trying to do a good job. Our first, and so this is what I wanted. These are our lessons learned. Our first pillar is time on task, having more of it, more time in the classroom. You know, I'm worried about the length of our school day in the United States. I know it's even shorter here in Brazil. My worry is that when you take out lunch and recess and bathroom breaks, and you know, you're down to 3 to 4 hours of instruction a day, and usually, and in the United States, that's less than half the year, so about 178 school days. So think about this: kids who are coming to school behind are getting 3 to 4 hours of instruction a day for less than half the year.
2 hours.
2 hours here? 2.5 hours. Okay. And for how many days?
Much less.
Much less? All right. With that amount of time on the clock, we. 200 days? A little more. Okay, so 2 to 3 hours of instruction a day for a little bit more than half the year. That sound right? Okay. With that little amount of time, I'd argue it's hard to expect teachers and principals to be great. We have to expect them to be miracle workers. There's simply not enough time to get the kids caught up and address the curriculum. And so now, more time does not guarantee success. This is not algebra, where a negative times a negative equals a positive. Right? But simply to set the system up for success, more time is a critical start to give the kids what they need. Our second pillar is choice and commitment. And the fact that within the public education system, you can give kids, parents, and teachers choices of where they're going to go to school. Now, choice exists around the world already for middle and upper income families. In most communities, right, if middle and upper income families don't like the public school in their community, they'll get out their checkbook and they'll send their kids to private school and write a large, sometimes a medium or a very large check to put their kids in another school. Or they'll move to another neighborhood where there's higher taxes, but they like the schools better. But for low-income families, they're trapped. There's one school they can go to, right? And when you have only one choice, that's the monopoly. And monopolies, we all know, produce low quality at high cost. Now, taking a step back, when I start talking about the choice commitment here, some people will think this is an attack on the basic core elements of public education. And far from it. I am an advocate for public education. What I'm a not advocate for is how we are delivering it. And that's what we have to separate. Public education is this concept that a community will pool all of our money and resources and make sure there's resources to educate all of our the future generation of our children. How we've chosen to deliver it, and I don't know the nuances of Brazil, but at least I can tell you in the United States, is we create these tax zones called school districts. Right? And we collect taxes, and we elect a school board that governs that school district. And the school board hires a superintendent, and the superintendent hires principals, and the principals run their schools. And we draw zones around the schools. And if you live in that zone, that's the school you go to. What I just described is not public education. It's how we've chosen to deliver public education. And we should not have so much hubris around the world to believe that in the last 100 years, we've all created God's gift to how you deliver public education to our children. And there's no other possible way we can do it. Charter schools in the United States are one additional way to deliver public education to a community. Charter schools are not God's gift to how you deliver public education either. What's important that charter schools do, though, is it changes the focus of accountability. Right now in the United States, there's no shortage of accountability. In fact, we have plenty of it. I just argue it's aimed wrong. Right now, with state accountability testing and the federal law, No Child Left Behind, making annual yearly progress, and all the testing we're doing, there's lots of accountability. I just argue it's aimed wrong. It's like the movie, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Eye of Sauron is at the state and federal government. Everyone is focused on making the state and federal government happy. There's nothing wrong with being accountable to the state and federal government. They're the largest funder. We should make them happy. I argue that still should be our secondary level of accountability. The first level of accountability should not be to the state and federal government, it should be to the kids and parents. So how do you make that shift? By giving them a choice. The minute the kids and parents can walk out of their house, walk out of their apartment, walk out their slum, and walk left and go to one public school, walk right and go to a different public school, run by a different organization, right? That's important too. If McDonald's was the only restaurant in the world, just because they put chicken on the menu doesn't mean it's not a monopoly, right? So if you don't have monopolies, different organizations and people are providing goods and services to a community. The minute you can walk out of your house and go to different public schools run by different people, that's the game changer. Because now that school and that school system has to have a strategy of not only how do we pass the test to make the government officials happy, how do we set the school so that the kids and parents will walk in our direction and want to come to our school. That's goal number one. Given every day there's a choice, how do you make the day so full of learning and so much fun, the kids want to keep coming back for more. That's why we think choice commitment is so important and such a game changer. Our third pillar is power to lead. The fact there's a well-trained, great school leader in place, the principal. I intentionally call our principals, what do you call them here in Brazil? Principals, what do you call them? Directors. I intentionally call directors school leaders to emphasize leaders, right? Because in too many schools in the United States, I meant here in Brazil as well, the director is not able to be the leader. And you can tell them is what I call, you give them the shoulder shrug test. You go up to a school leader or a director and you say, you have to get great results with all your kids, you have to prepare them for the universities. You know they're a director if they look at you and go, you gotta be kidding me. They'll say, I've got horrible teachers who I can't get rid of. You know, there's some great teachers I want to hire, but I can't get them past HR. And God forbid I want to take my money from my art money budget and move it to my technology money bucket, because that's good job instruction. I got to fill out forms in triplicate, wait 6 months, and give it my firstborn. And you expect me to get great results? So the way you get rid of that shoulder shrug, you say, all right, director, you're now school leader. Emphasize leader. You decide who teaches in this building. You decide who does not teach in the building. You decide how you're going to spend your dollars. And now we're going to hold you accountable for great results. More freedom, more accountability. I know in a heavily regulated and heavily unionized city and country that you have here, what I'm saying might be here, heresy, right? But remember, we were talking about this at lunch. 15 years ago in the United States, you couldn't find it. You could count on one hand the number of schools that were like this in the United States. Now there's 1,000. But 15 years ago, the reason why KIPP was on 60 Minutes is because it stood out. KIPP doesn't stand out anymore. The United States has not figured this out, but we're making this type of progress. And 15 years ago, they would say it was impossible to do this. The other basic ingredient of power to lead is this basic concept that people make the difference. And that's such a simple thought that also gets lost at societal level. Do another quick mental exercise to illustrate that. Imagine I have 2 classrooms up here. You're deciding which one you're going to put your own child into. Classroom on my left, there's not a bad teacher here, it's a mediocre teacher. And it's got every resource you can imagine. There's computers, there's science equipment, there's mathemobile kits, there's reading books, pack this room over here. Classroom to my right, bare room, not even desks. But there's a master teacher. Where do you put your child? Come on, this is the interactive part of my talk. Almost everyone tells me master teacher. We know we want that for our own child, right? But society, we get groupthink going. We forget that people make the difference. We forget there are no shortcuts. We start thinking, what little gizmo can we invent and sell it for $19.95 and pack it into this room over here to magically transform it from bad to okay, okay to good. I think we all live in the microwave generation. We want things quick and now. That makes sense when we're cooking popcorn. It doesn't make sense when we're teaching children how to read. So we have to go back to the basics, and we need to invest in the most important resource of all, which is the human resource. And every other industry has figured this out about, again, talent and leadership. Every other industry has figured out accept public education, right? We're the last ones to start, hopefully though that's going to start to catch on, that if we're going to expect our kids to learn better, if we expect our schools to be better, again, there's 101 things we have to fix. It starts with that belief and mindset, and from there, it's a talent pipeline. What we do to have great teachers and great leaders. Our fourth pillar is high expectations. As far as we're concerned, is university prep for reasons I already explained. And now we've grown up into high school, we've gone down into primary school. We have kids from age 3 through age 18. And we believe along the whole way is all university prep. And our last pillar is focus on results. While the ultimate results are how many of our kids are going to and through the universities, that's a long way away. So we need some kind of data to know how we're doing daily, weekly, monthly, annually, to make sure our kids are climbing the mountain at the right pace to where they're going to be eventually in the future. If you put those 5 pillars in place, the more time, the choice and commitment, the power to lead, the high expectations, focus on great results, we believe the kids will do great. We're on a mission to prove that, because far too often we hear all the yes buts. Si pero, yes buts. People will come out, and at first people will come very cynical when they visit KIPP. They think that we get success because we must have gone out there and we must have recruited a lot of very smart poor kids. Right? Then they look at the data and realize that's not what happened. Then they thought, all right, you must be taking random kids in, but you just kick out all the kids who can't learn very well. They realize that's not what happened. And then they start to nod their head and get inspired. And I'm walking around the school and I'm thinking, all right, just like we were inspired by Harriet Ball and Ray Esquith and our mentor teachers, these teachers are getting inspired too. And I'm thinking they're going to go out there and do great things as well. I get to the door and all the inspiration dies. And I start to hear these yes buts. And they'll start to tell me wherever they're from, for whatever political reason, legal reason, financial reason, socioeconomic reason, they think their community is the most screwed up place on the planet. And there must be something in the water in Southwest Houston that makes this work, that can't work where they're from. You know, they'll say, this is great, but it can't work in Chicago, can't work in rural Mississippi, can't work in Los Angeles, can't work in Miami. And they'll tell me all the reasons why. I realize, I can't win that debate at the door. So when I hear people say, I can't, this is great, but it can't work in Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, rural Mississippi, I get out my notes and write down, all right, we're going to start schools in Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, rural Mississippi. Because the actual proves it possible, right? So we are not going to, as we say, hypnotize all 50 million kids in public education in the United States. But we're going to contribute. And we're going to contribute with belief and mindset. Wherever people are making these yes but excuses of why it can't work, we're going to start schools there with the same kids in the same conditions to prove what can happen. Because the day the excuses end, or the day the solutions are going to start. Now, along the way, from 2000 to 2005, we were putting random little schools on all over the United States map. Today, KIPP has grown to 125 schools in 20 states and Washington, D.C. But instead of, starting about 2006, instead of putting random dots all over the map, we decided we're going to go where we already have a dot and make the dot bigger. Because our theory of change evolved into ultimately, we want to have an impact, not just on our children, but on the rest of the children's school system that we're not teaching. And the way we're going to do that is we're disciples of Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point. And we know, what's the tipping point? How many kids do we need to serve in a community? So not only are we doing a good job, we've pushed the school system to start to do a good job as well. And that the analogy we make all the time is we want to have the same impact on the public education system the way FedEx in the United States impacted the U.S. Post Office, right? When Fred Smith started FedEx in the 1970s, people were making lots of yes buts. That is impossible. You can't ship packages overnight guaranteed. He started doing it a little bit. People were making more yes buts. All right, you can send a package from Chicago to New York, but you can't send a package from Atlanta, Georgia to Rio overnight guaranteed. When FedEx got to 10% market share, the U.S. Post Office, which was a government monopoly at the time, they started doing next day air. So FedEx didn't hurt the post office, made them better. And today, whether it's FedEx, or UPS, or DHL, or the post office, they all do a good job sending our packages where they want to go. And I think a big reason is because they know we have choices. If they lose our package, we're going somewhere else next time. So if 10% is the tipping point overnight shipping, is there a similar type of tipping point in public education? No one's ever tried it. So that's what we're trying to do in different cities around the United States. We're trying to grow to have enough market share, and we're not talking 50, 70, 90%. We're talking 5, 10, 15% to chase a tipping point, to start to change societal beliefs and mindsets of what's possible, and get the school district to actually start to compete with us. Stop acting like a monopoly, start acting like a competitor, where they're taking care of their customers, the kids and the parents. Last two things, and I want to hear your questions. On the third page there, just to let you know that KIPP Foundation is also kind of beyond doing a school leadership training program. We've also we're the research and development, we're the R&D arm of all the KIPP schools around the country. And we've created a very sophisticated leadership competency model of how we train our directors. And we've created a framework for excellent teaching of how we train our teachers. Now, again, partly we don't have one standard curriculum. We don't have one standard way we teach. Our goal is to train leaders, directors, and then they're responsible for how to train their teachers. But we give them tools to use if they choose. Now, there's nothing, I think, earth-shatteringly special about what we're happening. I mean, look at our framework for excellent teaching. One thing I want to point out, though, we have great classroom culture. You have the lesson cycle, and you start with a knowledge base. But that heart on the top, self and others, is what I wanted to point out. One thing that we're very big on at KIPP is not just teaching academics, but teaching character. If kids are going to be successful at going to and through the universities, yes, they need to be able to read, write, compute, and think critically. But they also need these non-academic skills as well. They need to learn grit. They need to learn resiliency. They need to learn self-control. They need to learn optimism. They need to learn curiosity, right? Those things, none of us are born with those character traits. We learn them. We learn them from the adults in our lives, our parents, our family, our teachers, our priests. And so we believe if you're learning something, that must mean by definition it can be taught. And so we've been doing a lot of work with Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania on how you deliberately teach character strengths to children and how you measure how well they're doing. The other thing about that self and others is what we call KIPP the J factor. We call it the joy factor. There's got to be joy in our schools. Again, I know these hours, 7:30 to 5 o'clock, sound really long, but keep in mind, we are a school of choice. If all we did was teach kids how to read, write, and compute all day long, what child in their right mind would want to come to our school? They would be running for the hills as fast as they can. So because of choice commitment, we've also had to make sure not only do we hold our kids to high expectations and teach them university prep, it's got to be done in a way where there's joy, right? And because you have a longer school day, beyond, as I said, beyond just the academics, you also have the fine arts. You have the athletics, right? God loved the child that wakes up in the morning and says, today is geometry class. Yes, right? Love that child. There's not many of them in the world. More often than not is, today is the football game. Yes. Today is the school musical. Yes. Today is the concert. Yes. Today is the art show. Yes. Right? So there's got to be those elements of school as well, which is why you have to have a longer school day to make them fit in without sacrificing the academics as well. I just want to point that out. And last, I just want to end, the last picture in your packet, this is my favorite picture. This is, I wasn't able to do a slideshow for you. Normally when I do these talks, I read Dr. Seuss' On Beyond Zebra, which talks about going beyond Z and having new ideas and pushing it. And it's great to talk about it in the Dr. Seuss world, and everything I said about changing beliefs and mindsets to preparing kids for universities. That's all sounds nice and good, but it doesn't sound realistic. To me, this is the actual proving the possible. What you're looking at here is the 1924 Tour de France. And if you're having trouble seeing what's going on in that picture of the 1924 Tour de France, in that front row, one of the cyclists is lighting a cigarette of another cyclist. Let me let that sink in. 80 to 90 years ago, in the world, not only do we think that smoking was okay for you, we actually believe smoking helped athletic performance. I found that very hard to believe. Now, I live in Houston, Texas, which is the world's largest medical center, So I took this picture to the medical center and asked the doctors, please explain to me what's going on in the picture. Sure enough, 80, 90 years ago, we believed that smoking thinned out the blood. So therefore, the blood would travel around the body faster, delivering oxygen to the muscles at a faster rate. Let's think about this. 80 to 90 years ago, when you were training for the most difficult athletic contest known to mankind, part of that training regimen was bring along a few extra packs of Marlboros. Talk about a complete 180-degree mind shift in thinking and belief. Now, I know a lot of people in Brazil and even in the University of the United States, a lot of people are still smoking. But they're not doing it because they're training for a marathon. They're doing it because they think they look cool, right? So if that type of mindset shift can change in smoking, why can't it change in public education? If we could somehow snap a picture of how we were delivering public education to the children in Sao Paulo today, and we put that picture in a packet 80 years from now, I bet people would be chuckling looking at that picture the way we chuckle looking at this. If we're courageous enough to recognize that, realize that, and go beyond Z and start to challenge beliefs and mindsets and start to prove the possible with some other ideas, we, like the Messiah in Africa, can also say all of our children are well. Thank you for having me here today.
Alguns comentários.
Bem rápido. Primeiro, eu quero cumprimentar o Mike pela excelente apresentação, super estimulante para nós que trabalhamos com escola pública no Brasil e sabemos que as dificuldades são muito parecidas com algumas que foram citadas por você a respeito do caso americano. Tá? A diferença é que nós ainda estamos, embora melhorando, nós ainda estamos numa situação de desigualdade muito maior, por esse pipeline que foi mostrado aqui. Né? No Brasil, hoje, nós temos 11% da população de 24 anos que está terminando o ensino superior, só que desses 11%, apenas 15% estão no quartil inferior de renda. E, no caso do ensino médio, isso está em torno de 30%, de acordo com a última PNAD. Então, é uma situação complicada, porque, embora a renda das famílias e das pessoas esteja melhorando, a sociedade está melhorando, o Brasil hoje é um país que tem uma classe média crescente, né? Isso significa que nós estamos vivendo uma situação nova do ponto de vista da estrutura social do país, mas um dos maiores problemas que o Brasil vai enfrentar e já está enfrentando é a baixa qualidade da educação em geral e da pública em particular, que hoje responde por 87% do total da oferta e da demanda. Né? Então, ouvir a experiência da KIPP School, para nós é muito interessante, porque mostra que há alternativas que nós ainda não exploramos. Eu, em particular, eu sou fã da Charter School. Eu sei que no Brasil tem muita resistência ideológica. Né? Há uma ideia de que Charter School é privatização do ensino, é uma política neoliberal, é uma política que vai tirar alguma coisa que é direito de todos, quando, na verdade, nós não estamos falando disso, nós estamos falando em oferecer alternativas para melhorar a equidade do sistema. Eu acho que esse é o ponto que me parece mais importante. Como melhorar a equidade, né? Aí, eu acho que tem algumas coisas que o Brasil é bem diferente dos Estados Unidos, principalmente em relação à organização do sistema. Quer dizer, nos Estados Unidos, os distritos escolares, eles permitem que os professores da Charter School resolvessem fazer uma aventura de bater na porta, chamar as pessoas, mostrar uma ideia diferente de escola. Aqui no Brasil nós temos sistemas estaduais, municipais, federais e privados no mesmo distrito, no mesmo território. o que significa que as escolas são diferentes, os sistemas são diferentes, e isso torna a mudança da política um pouco mais difícil. No entanto, nós temos algumas experiências recentes muito inovadoras. Eu vou citar algumas que estão até presentes aqui. Por exemplo, o Marcos Magalhães lidera uma iniciativa muito interessante, que é quase, eu diria, uma charter school, quase, não é exatamente uma charter school, mas tem que falar baixo, né? Porque a iniciativa do ICE, ela busca trabalhar um novo conceito de escola, um novo trabalho do protagonismo do aluno, da participação das famílias, o professor de dedicação exclusiva, muitas das características que o Mike mencionou sobre as KIPP, que fazem diferença nas KIPP School, mas, no entanto, nós ainda enfrentamos uma certa dificuldade, especialmente com relação à organização da escola. Como é que, eu sempre imagino a dificuldade que é para um diretor de escola ter que trabalhar com uma equipe que ele não escolheu, ter que trabalhar com professores que muitas vezes não concordam com a orientação pedagógica da escola. Isso é muito difícil, né? Quer dizer, porque o fato de construir uma equipe que de fato seja integrada, comprometida com um projeto pedagógico, comprometida com uma ideia de escola semelhante à KIPP School, que tem foco no aluno, que privilegia resultado, que está preocupado em estimular a curiosidade da criança, tudo isso é fundamental. Mas para fazer isso eu preciso contar com gente, com recursos humanos que estejam de fato articulados, integrados numa proposta comum. E para fazer isso, o diretor de escola, além de ser um líder, ele precisa ser um líder, óbvio, mas ele precisa também ter condições de organizar a sua equipe. E isso é um problema que nós não conseguimos avançar no Brasil. A resistência é uma resistência que eu diria que não é só corporativa dos sindicatos, há uma resistência inclusive da academia, quer dizer, a própria universidade brasileira, ela entende que a carreira ela não tem a ver com a equipe na escola, que o diretor não deve ter um papel de liderança que impeça o professor de desenvolver o seu projeto individual pessoal. Então, eu acho que esse tema nós precisávamos trabalhar mais para poder avançar no Brasil alguma coisa semelhante. Uma outra experiência que eu tive a oportunidade de conviver muito de perto os parceiros da educação, eu sempre digo, os parceiros da educação, eles estão prontos para ser um embrião de uma charter school. O que é? Um grupo de empresários que apoiam 90 escolas públicas aqui na cidade de São Paulo e em alguns municípios próximos. E a dificuldade é exatamente essa. Como fazer que o diretor da escola e a equipe da escola compre a ideia de um novo projeto de gestão do currículo, de gestão da sala de aula, de gestão das relações pessoais, das relações com a comunidade, quer dizer, a ideia de gestão em sentido amplo, e que nós temos dificuldade em desenvolver porque a escola está muito presa a uma legislação atrasada, está presa a aspectos burocráticos que são difíceis de serem mudados, né? E isso faz com que a gente não consiga ver a possibilidade de mudança. No entanto, eu sou otimista. Eu acho que a possibilidade de mudança está acontecendo. Nós temos, assim, exemplos, espaços. O Itaú Social tem aquele projeto na Zona Leste que parece que vai muito bem, pelo que eu leio nos relatórios, não tive a chance de visitar. Mas o que a gente vê no Brasil é que a mudança está vindo a partir de baixo e de municípios pequenos. Quer dizer, a mudança está acontecendo na escola. Tem escolas muito boas no setor público, isso aparece nas avaliações nacionais, são casos isolados. Então, a questão é como fazer para replicar. Um ponto que o Mike destacou e que eu acho que é o nosso grande desafio é como garantir a dedicação exclusiva do professor a uma só escola, porque é impossível pensar uma escola boa se o professor não tiver tempo para ficar na escola, para se dedicar ao projeto da escola, para se dedicar aos alunos, à comunidade escolar, para preparar a aula, para se planejar, para capacitar, para discutir, para trocar ideias, uma série de coisas que você só tem condições de fazer se as condições de trabalho forem de fato favoráveis à organização de um grupo integrado, de uma equipe de verdade. Isso no Brasil é muito difícil. Eu acho que várias secretarias de educação estão começando a abrir, a própria ICE já trabalha com professor de dedicação exclusiva, tempo integral. Alguns estados e municípios começam a fazer concurso para isso. Então isso é um sinal positivo. Agora, nós ainda não descobrimos como fazer para poder ter uma gestão compartilhada, público-privada, de tal modo que nós sejamos capazes de aproveitar tudo que o setor público oferece de bom, porque o setor público hoje, ele financia toda a educação pública brasileira, paga todas as contas da escola. A parceria com o setor privado seria muito mais no sentido da inovação na gestão, da inovação no currículo, inovação na capacitação, sem querer tirar do Estado o protagonismo que é do governo, que é do Estado. Não é essa a ideia, tirar do Estado, é abrir a oportunidade de novas escolhas, de novos modelos de gestão que possam ser replicados. Então, nós estamos buscando isso, inclusive do ponto de vista da legislação, porque a legislação brasileira ela é muito complicada nesse aspecto. Quer dizer, nós não conseguimos quebrar muitas regras que são, inclusive, constitucionais. Embora tenha uma saída que, na minha cabeça, é bastante clara, que é porque em algumas áreas de política pública é possível fazer parceria, como na área da saúde, por exemplo, ou na área da cultura, e na educação não pode. Eu não consigo entender. Quer dizer, se isso vale para a saúde, se vale para a cultura, deve valer também para a educação, porque, afinal de contas, a Constituição é a mesma, o país é o mesmo, e isso, meu tempo acabou. E o Norma está aqui muito bravo. Então, era basicamente isso que eu queria livremente falar sobre o tema.
Vamos, em nossos seminários, o Instituto tive mais de 200 seminários na nossa vida institucional, sempre prezamos o diálogo. E também uma coisa mais difícil, de não fazer lamúrias, diagnósticos e denúncias, mas de propor soluções. Então, eu gostaria de ouvir de vocês algumas ideias em que podemos partir por uma coisa melhor.
But I have a English or português inglês? Português. Ok. É mais uma pergunta, mas no sentido de talvez ver o caminho para utilizar essa experiência como é nos Estados Unidos. Imagina que você, um belo dia, na Houston, tocasse o seu telefone, fosse um superintendente do distrito de Rhode Island ou Nebraska, em algum lugar nos Estados Unidos. Eu gostaria muito de implantar um conjunto de KIPP schools aqui no meu distrito. Aí você vai até lá, conversa, se convence que é uma proposição interessante, e aí vem a minha pergunta. Qual é o roadmap que você utiliza desde o momento em que a decisão conjunta é tomada entre KIPP e um certo distrito até a primeira escola que está em operação, e quanto tempo isso leva?
The two elements for the roadmap that are needed are, one, having the traditional school system leaders believe a different outcome is possible and see there's some elements of KIPP all or in part that they want to adopt. And then having tools for them to actually, once they believe, what next? On the, we already see examples of the first part, belief and mindset happening. It's no coincidence in Houston where I am, which is our largest region. KIPP has 21 schools and 9,400 kids in Houston. There's two other great charter schools, Yes Prep and Harmony. Combined, we have 30,000 kids in our charter systems, and we have 36,000 kids on our wait list, which is now, we're a little bit over 10% of all the kids in Houston. It's no coincidence we've gotten to that size, and a year and a half ago, the superintendent of the Houston school system announced a new program called Apollo 20. And what he said was, we are sick and tired of those charter schools taking all of our kids. In fact, we're going to stop the bleeding. In fact, we want to get some of them to come back. What we're going to do is we're going to identify the worst schools in Houston. We are going to bring in better teachers and better principals. We're going to lengthen the school day, week, and year. We actually had to get the law changed for them to do it, because charters can have any kind of calendar we want. The traditional school system it's told by the state what their calendar is, so they had to get a law change to do it. They took down the state test banners, they put up university banners. The individualized instruction with home visits and tutoring and phone calls. Sound familiar? This is great. This is great. Please keep copying us. In fact, I hope they beat us, because then we've all won, right? So that's an example where the scale is starting to see examples of that happen. The road for what they do next. So the biggest thing that Houston realized they needed, and after 2 years of doing this Apollo 20, with all those things I mentioned, where they put in place a great director, great things happened. Where they put in place same old type of director, not same old results, right? So again, leadership is the critical path. And what we're starting to see is the KIPP School Leadership Program has grown to serve more and more. We no longer just train KIPP school leaders, we train other charter leaders, and we train traditional system principals and directors. We've also helped other people set up their own training program. For example, where I am in Houston, the Jones School of Business at Rice University, which is a business school, became the first business school in the United States to actually have a principal training program embedded in the business school. So you can go get your MBA and have it tied to a principal certificate. And they modeled their training program after the KIPP School Leadership Program. So we're now starting to see multiple pathways for innovative training programs to bring more talented people as leaders into the system. So I think those are the type of innovations we see happening.
Silêncio. Não temos participação, não temos diálogo.
Eu tenho uma pergunta. Você falou um pouco de... Bom, eu quero falar de comunicação. Muita gente sabe que a profissão de professor é uma profissão solitária. A gente é cercado por moleque, criança, mas a gente não tem muita chance para trocar ideia entre si. E como é que isso funciona aqui, dentro de uma escola individual e dentro da rede?
First off, because you have a longer school day, not only does that mean that there's more time for the children to learn more subjects, it also means there's more time for teachers to have planning. So, in a typical U.S. school, a teacher will have probably somewhere around 45 minutes of planning time during the school day. At KIPP, a KIPP teacher has between 2 and 3 hours of planning time during the day, which means they have more time to do some of the isolated things, work on their lesson planning, work on their grading. But some of that time, because we can have flexibility in the schedule, they have time to have shared planning time with either their peers on their grade level or with their peers in the subject vertically. And so they can do team planning, and they can work on issues together as groups to make it less isolationist. The other thing we've done is we've started to, this is one place where we can start to leverage technology better in public education. You know, education is the only sector where when you put technology in it, all you've done is added another row to your budget and made things more expensive. Right? Every other industry has figured out how you leverage technology to make things more efficient, right? Whereas education makes it more complicated, which I find interesting. But one thing we're doing is we partnered with this group called A Better Lesson, which is basically the equivalent of Facebook for teachers. And it's a way teachers can post their lesson plans and their unit tests and their assessments on their page, and you friend other teachers and you can share ideas digitally, which is great for us because beyond the fact that we want KIPP teachers in the same building to be working together, I want KIPP teachers in Houston to be working with KIPP teachers in New York, with teachers in Los Angeles, and by now we're starting to do international work as well. Now we have KIPP, we're not starting KIPP schools around the country, around the world, but we're training leaders that are starting these KIPP-inspired schools in India, Israel, Mexico, South Africa. Hopefully we'll see Brazil. And so their teachers are now part of this A Better Lesson KIPP community as well, and everyone's posting lessons and sharing things. It's no longer just a national sharing platform, it's becoming a global sharing platform, which is making people feel less alone, which is very important.
Eu queria só, continuando com a questão dele, a escola pública em geral aqui, a maioria das escolas públicas são período... A maioria das escolas públicas aqui no Brasil são período, meio período, né? Diferente dos Estados Unidos. E como ele estava falando, quer dizer, eu sou pedagoga, minha formação foi pedagoga, nos últimos 7 anos eu tenho trabalhado na escola pública estadual aqui em São Paulo. Então, o que ele estava falando de se sentir sozinho, eu me sinto muito sozinha, por quê? Porque a gente tem meio período, né, para dar aula. Eu dou aula no ensino fundamental 1. Então, você entra às 7 horas e você sai meio-dia, você não tem tempo de... É só dando aula, realmente. Sai de uma aula, entra na outra. Você tem 20 minutos de intervalo, que não dá para conversar muito com o professor. Quer dizer, então essa falta de diálogo é muito importante, né? Você se sente muito sozinho porque você não tem tempo para sentar e planejar junto com os professores. Então, essa é uma questão que eu acho que da solidão e de você dividir conhecimento, interesse entre nós. Nós temos 2 horas de HTPC que a gente chama por semana, mas eu acho que é muito pouco, na verdade. E o grande problema aqui também, eu acho que é a questão... primeiro, eu queria dar parabéns pelo trabalho de vocês, que eu fiquei muito contente. Eu já tinha lido a respeito do trabalho de vocês e estou aqui ouvindo, né? Quer dizer, fico muito contente de saber que está dando certo nos Estados Unidos. Eu acredito na educação pública. Eu acho que é possível ter uma educação pública de qualidade, porque eu faço isso na minha sala de aula com meus alunos. E eu acho que é possível a gente ampliar isso para a escola como um todo e para a rede como um todo.
Muito obrigado. Kelly.
Eu tive o privilégio de ser diretora de uma das escolas concebidas pelo ICE há 10 anos atrás, no Nordeste brasileiro. E isso foi uma experiência transformadora na vida, não apenas minha, da minha equipe, mas sobretudo dos meus estudantes. A ponto de hoje podemos ajudar a conceber o mesmo tipo de escola em outros estados e municípios. Então, há 10 anos isso vem sendo desenvolvido. E o yes and but continua a existir. E sempre, em qualquer região do Brasil onde a gente possa atuar. Há muita semelhança, muita identidade entre a KIPP School e parte dos princípios e dos fundamentos com os quais a gente trabalha no nosso modelo, o que é muito bom. Sobretudo porque não há como discutir sobre a necessidade de ter liderança na escola e de principalmente ter como foco o estudante e não o professor, ter como foco o processo de aprendizagem e não o ensino. O que pode ser aprendido tem que ser ensinado, pode ser ensinado. A questão é que cada vez mais se percebe a distância entre algumas das ferramentas, metodologias e princípios até, que não conseguem mais sequer penetrar na escola porque o próprio sistema impede. Atuais sistemas onde sequer a palavra liderança pode ser pronunciada, como é possível trabalhar com uma Secretaria de Educação onde a palavra liderança não pode ser verbalizada. Então, alguma dica para sobreviver a tudo isso?
Eu acho que bom ter dicas. Eu acho que o Mike tem muitas dicas, mas eu acho que é bom algumas ideias vêm de vocês. E gostaria de ouvir o que surge deste diálogo aqui, o que pode ser de inovação na...
Poderia fazer mais uma pergunta?
Sim, sim.
I just would just remind you guys that when Dave and I started in 1994 with KIPP, and for the first 6 years, we weren't talking about leadership. We weren't talking about training leaders on organizational culture behavior. We weren't talking about the tipping point or theories of change. We were just educators doing the work, right? And I think that's where it starts. It's just, you don't, I mean, you need to have a vision of what can happen for society, but it starts with the first step. And it starts with just creating a proof point. It can be a school, or a couple schools, or a group of schools, and then you figure out how to leverage the success. So it's, the daunting task is how to still have the vision of how to impact millions of children, but like if that's the starting point, we're never gonna take a first step, because how do you take a step to impact millions of children? So it's this balancing having the vision with a very concrete, specific mission for what am I going to do for certain children in my school? How do I make the difference? And going back to what you said just about the time in school, I think, and this is when it starts, hopefully this is where it's going to push a debate in Brazil, which is, you know, I learned from my mentor teacher 20 years ago some very simple lessons. When you plant corn, corn grows, right? If you plant a little bit of corn, you get a little bit of corn. If you plant a lot of corn, you get a lot of corn, right? So it's just what is Brazil going to invest in? And that's going to, what you're going to invest in is going to be what you get. And so that's, you know, hopefully the fact that the things going in your favor, like in the United States, one, as the world's becoming flat, we're no longer comparing our results to the school next door, or the city next door, or the state within our country. We're starting to look up at what's going on, and you know what's going on in other countries that are starting to figure it out, which is putting pressure on us. And the more that other people are starting to figure it out, combined with our own problems with our pipeline, that's creating a bottom-up push. It's creating a pressure on the top to allow more bottom-up things to happen. That's what I would hope is what's starting. So I share your optimism of where it's all going.
Well, I think that concretely there, I mean, it has to start in the classroom, it has to start in the school, but there, you know, you reach fundamental problems in the changing of legislation. And I mean, there is a fundamental political problem on how to mobilize support for the changing of legislation that permits the kind of experiences that you're talking about.
Mike, dentre os vários desafios que uma escola ou uma rede de ensino possui em qualquer lugar do mundo, com as suas devidas particularidades, talvez a qualificação permanente do professor seja uma das principais ou a principal. É isso que garante efetivamente o aprendizado do aluno. Considerando a tua experiência com as, se eu não me engano, 225 KIPP schools, é isso? 125 KIPP schools. O que você considera como mais salutar ou mais importante que foi desenvolvido e que continua a ser desenvolvido pelas KIPP schools para garantir a qualificação permanente do corpo docente, do professor e fazer com que esse mindset do professor seja direcionado para uma qualificação permanente?
Eu vou acrescentar algo. A pergunta dele é na mesma direção. Você, Mike, mencionou o currículo das KIPP Schools e a forma de trabalhar com currículo. Então, eu gostaria de saber como vocês desenvolveram ou se desenvolveram um currículo próprio para as escolas KIPP e como esse currículo é trabalhado nos programas de capacitação e treinamento.
So, 18 years into KIPP, we're just starting to work on developing our curriculum. Intentionally, again, our strategy was to find great teachers, right, and train them to become leaders and turn them loose, and they were going to figure it out. As we've grown, we realized we still do not want to dictate curriculum. We don't want that to be top down, but we do want to create a roadmap and create tools. And after 18 years of seeing what's worked fabulously well and what's failed horribly, right, we can kind of piece together the best practices to create a good curriculum to give our schools, not that they have to use it, if they want to use it, they can. If they want to adapt it, they can. If they want to throw it in the trash can and use something they think is better, good luck, right? Because ultimately, what they have to do is make sure their kids are prepared for the universities. So we're just starting to work on that now. To your point about teacher training, you're absolutely right, and the mental image I like to give you for an analogy is how innovation leads to innovation. Picture a race car in pit road, okay? Like an Indy Formula car or NASCAR. And when the tire changers figured out how to shave a second off their time to change the tires, the gas tank fillers had pressure to figure out how to shave a second off their time as well, right? Innovation leads to innovation. And so as KIPP started and has grown, and now there's other charter groups doing the same work, it's put pressure on the system to have other innovations. And one of the biggest innovations that we put pressure on is around teacher training. When I started KIPP in the 90s, I needed to hire 4 or 5 teachers a year. It was easy for me to pick the low-hanging fruit off the tree, find great teachers, turn them loose, and say, keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to get great results. And it worked. Now, with 40, we have 4,000 teachers. Given our growth, KIPP is trying to hire 800 to 1,000 teachers a year. All the other charter groups are doing the same thing. The school system has figured it out, so now there is a talent war, where even the school system is now recruiting just as hard as we are. They've invested in they realize their HR department has to be talent recruiters, not just paper pushers. And so there's been more pressure now to where are we going to find all these great teachers. There's pressure on the ed schools to start to evolve. And where the ed schools have not evolved, here's what gets really interesting. My partner in crime, Dave Levin in New York, along with Norman Atkins from Uncommon Schools, helped start a brand new teacher training university in New York City called the Relay Graduate School of Education. They got approved by the New York Board of Regents 2 years ago, and they're about to become an accredited graduate school. In fact, I think they just got their accreditation last month. And now they're going to start to replicate around the United States. It's a brand new teacher training university, which I described is focused much more on the practicum than the pedagogy. Yes, our teachers need to take a couple classes to learn pedagogy, but I've always found it very ironic that we try to teach our teachers the 4 modalities of learning, visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic, by sitting in a lecture hall, right? There's something very sad and ironic about that. And I said at the beginning, teachers might learn the basics of teaching from classroom pedagogy, but they learn how to become a great teacher by being in the field, in classrooms with other master teachers. So what the Relay Grad School of Education has done is there's no longer, the main classroom for teachers training is their classroom with the children. And their textbook is a flip camera. They go on Saturdays, they take some classes, learn how to teach, whether they're working on discipline, they're working on delivering instruction, they're working on assessment. They film themselves practicing what they learned. They upload the video, send to the professor for comments. At the end of 2 years, they have to do a master's defense, and the way they have to justify them graduating their master's is to use student achievement data and prove that their students made significant academic progress while they were teaching them. If they cannot demonstrate that, they don't get the master's degree. So it's a new way of doing teacher training and creating master's degrees for teachers, which other traditional ed schools are now starting to see that and beg, borrow, and steal that idea and put in place in their curriculum as well.
Isabel?
Eu queria fazer 3 comentários. O primeiro já foi agora totalmente abordado, porque tem a ver com a formação de professores. E assim, eu ando refletindo muito sobre alguns desses aspectos, muito com base na experiência do trabalho que nós realizamos em parceria com o Instituto Fernando Braudel e a Secretaria de Educação na Zona Leste, onde dois dos aprendizados nessa reforma de Nova York foram trabalhados nas escolas. E aí o primeiro conversa com o que o Mike já acabou de falar, que é a formação de professores. Eu estou muito convencida de que tutoria, como estratégia de formação em serviço, precisa ser melhor desenvolvida aqui. A gente precisa encontrar formas de profissionalizar, ampliar e trazer isso para dentro do cotidiano escolar. Porque não dá mais para aceitar, pensar a formação de professores numa continuidade de formação teórica e não de aprimoramento, né, do seu trabalho, do alcance dos resultados que ele está buscando junto com os alunos. Eu acho que a primeira questão já foi tratada muito bem no que o Mike trouxe, mas eu traria uma provocação, que é para a nossa reflexão aqui, que é esse mesmo sentido de formação continuada de professores, com um teor muito prático, precisa também ser repensado na formação inicial. Assim, não dá para a gente continuar lidando com a formação continuada que está tentando resgatar. E aí, nessa conversa que a gente tem aqui, trazer as faculdades de pedagogia para esse jogo, para essa conversa, torna-se fundamental. O segundo ponto tem a ver também com o tema que a gente tem trabalhado, e aí, Mike, eu queria ouvir um pouco mais de você sobre as estratégias de aproximação da relação família-escola. Eu acho que a gente lida aqui em diferentes contextos com esse fator que é muito importante, né? A gente está falando ainda na escola pública de muitos jovens que são a primeira geração da família com um tempo maior de escolarização formal e com famílias que buscam se aproximar de escolas da escola e não sabe como, e escola que busca se aproximar da família e não sabe como. Eu acho que nos ajudaria muito na reflexão ouvir um pouco da experiência de vocês de forma mais estruturada na KIPP sobre esse tema. E por fim, o terceiro tema, que eu acho que nesses dias também está borbulhando aqui no Brasil, é a relação avaliação e aprendizagem. Como pensar as avaliações estruturadas, seja de sistema, seja as avaliações internas da escola, com foco em ajuda para o professor. Como é que vocês têm trabalhado e utilizado resultados de avaliação como estratégia de melhoria das condições de aprendizagem?
Thank you. Good questions. On the ed schools, you're right. Anytime you have a government monopoly system, which is how most of our countries have set up our public education system, you have existing organizations beyond the monopoly structure. You have other related organizations who set themselves up in a way where any change to the monopoly hurts them. And I would argue that ed schools are one of the cartels. That unions and ed schools and textbook publishers and groups like that all benefit off the current system. So any attack, any ideas on how to reform the current system winds up being an attack, not just on the school system, but on all these cottage industries as well. And I think the provocative question I'd ask back, which you all need to ask yourselves in this country that I push in the United States as well, is ultimately we have to decide what is the purpose of our public education system. Is it to educate the children? Is it to educate our children? Or is it a jobs program for the adults? Now, when you first ask that question, I mean, I would say, oh, well, of course it's to educate our children. Well, if that's the case, there are so many laws and rules and policies that in no way can we justify how these different laws and rules and policies can benefit children. They benefit the adults in the system, both directly and indirectly. And so ultimately, the starting point question to ask is, what do we believe the public education system is there for? And then what we believe will our laws and rules and policies align with that belief? And if from that perspective, ed schools are, like others, are one of the organizations that are going to have to reform and change if it's going to be about helping children. For families and schools, you're absolutely right that there needs to be a tighter partnership between families and schools. And what always confused Dave and me 20 years ago when we were rookie teachers was one of the early lessons we learned in our early training was never ever visit the kids and parents in their homes. And I never understood that. And from the very beginning before we did KIPP, that if we need to form relationships with our children, if we want to have a tight relationship with the parents, two options. We can sit at school and wait for them to come to us, right? Or we can go to them. And given the fact that most of our parents, given they were low-income families, they were working 2 or 3 jobs just to pay rent and put food on the table, if we were waiting for them to come to school, it never would happen. And it doesn't mean they don't love their children. It means that this is a lower priority than putting food on the table and paying rent. But so it just made natural sense to us, so why don't we then go visit them at night on the weekends? Because there's certainly, they might not be able to be involved, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be supportive. And this is what I call, a lot of people have bad feelings about President Bush from a decade ago, but one thing he said about education that always resonated with me that I like, he talked about that we need to battle the soft bigotry of low expectations, as he called it. And the fact, one of the yes buts I hear about KIPP is that people say, well, KIPP works because we have, simply by definition, the fact that we have kids and parents choosing to come to us means that we don't directly cream, but we've indirectly creamed the motivated kids and parents out of the system and left a traditional school with a vast majority of kids and parents who don't care. And my response to that is the question when people make that statement, I asked back and I said, I'm just curious, what percent of any low-income community, what percent of the kids and parents do you think care about education? What percent of the parents do you think love their children and want what's best for their children? Do you really think that we can take 5 or 10% of the kids and parents and drain the community of all the love, passion, and talent? And then people will say, oh, well, that's not what I meant. Like, yeah, I think that's what you meant. Right? Do we really believe it's 5 or 10%? Or do we believe it's 90, 95%? Yes, dysfunction does happen in low-income communities. Personally, I'd argue more dysfunction happens in the upper-income communities, but we'll save that talk for another time. Right? So, but there's the parents, vast majority of the parents in low-income communities love their children, realize that they want their children to have a better life than them, and do realize that ultimately education is a ticket. What they don't know how to do is how to make that happen. If a parent had a 7th grade education, they don't know how to make sure their kid climbs a mountain to and through the universities. They're looking for a partner. And when that teacher is sitting in their house, suddenly now they have a partner. And a vast majority of them are going to latch on. That's why in Houston, again, we have 9,000 kids in our schools. Without trying to market this, we have 10,000 kids and parents who signed up to come to KIPP. Right? I can't build schools fast enough. And we're intentionally going slow because I don't want to start schools so fast that they're not going to be high quality. But you know, the parents have figured this out, and the parents, if you build it and it's successful, the parents are going to come and they want this for their kids. The last part, the learning and assessment, we are just starting to work on that. You know, in the United States, we're working at 46 states have signed on to the Common Core, who are all collaborating on creating a unified curriculum of assessment that will truly be college preparatory, where we can also measure growth year to year. And what I believe we need is, I've always talked about the fact that I have no problem centralizing a common what, right? Why should KIPP Houston, why should the state of Nebraska try to figure out how to compete with China on their own, right? And there's not, how many different ways do you want to describe how the kids should learn math all the way through the system? There's not infinite possibilities. I mean, we can get into some interesting arguments about at what age should they learn algebra and, you know, and things like that, but ultimately there's not that much difference. So create the common what, but allow complete freedom and create an innovative how. Have the what in place, have testing that measures that what, and turn the schools and the system loose on how they're going to teach the kids that work to be able to do well for the what. And in that way, you're combining top down with bottom up. Top down, you're putting the marker out there of what we expect the kids to learn. Bottom up, you're letting people come up with the best practice for how to do it, and whoever figures it out, schools will start to copy the ones who are doing it right. And I think that's how you let bottom up happen.
Let me just make one observation. Our institute, we ran this program in the Zona Leste of Sao Paulo, in the periphery of Sao Paulo, and we adapted a scheme that was done in New York with parent coordinators. In New York, the parent coordinators were university graduates, and our parent coordinators were women from the neighborhood who were very bright and who had worked in the schools, either in the school lunch program or as janitors or whatever, but they knew the schools. And they were the ones who visited the parents. And this has made a big difference in their lives. I mean, this is something, I don't know whether KIPP has tried something like this, but this has worked for us, and I think the Ito Social Foundation is applying this in other states in Brazil.
Posso falar? Eu até vou falar alto, a pessoa que está produzindo. A Priscila, ela está ali. Onde é que tem um? Ele vai pegar. Ele vai pegar. Maria, tem mais um? Tem. Dá o microfone lá. Obrigado. Ô Mike, assim como a Maria Helena, como meu nome é Olavo, eu até gostaria de nossa equipe aqui da parceira da Educação, Maria Helena comentou, acho que temos várias ideias entusiasmantes para tentar aplicar, mas ao mesmo tempo algumas frustrações com relação às barreiras que são postas, que muitos aí já comentaram. Assim como Maria Helena, eu sou um super fã da KIPP School, eu cheguei a visitar uma KIPP nos Estados Unidos e li o livro há não muito tempo atrás, quando eu ainda estava na faculdade, e eu na época até pensei, poxa, seria muito legal conhecer o cara, um dos caras que inventou essa ideia toda, e então muito legal estar aqui, poder conhecê-lo e ouvi-lo. A minha pergunta, eu acho que várias boas perguntas sobre como a gente pode tentar avançar isso aqui no Brasil já foram feitas, seria mais sobre o futuro da KIPP nos Estados Unidos. Você comentou sobre o tipping point, que esse vai ser um grande objetivo, sempre foi um grande objetivo da KIPP nos Estados Unidos, mas o que vocês pensam como organização nos próximos 5, nos próximos, enfim, daqui 10 anos, aonde vocês enxergam a KIPP? É uma expansão nos Estados Unidos? Você chegou a comentar sobre uma expansão talvez para outros países? Qual é a visão da KIPP para os próximos anos? Seria a minha pergunta.
We still have a lot of a lot of our regions have a lot of growth to do to chase the tipping point in their local community. We are going to have, in 5 years from now, we will have over 200 schools and probably over 100,000 kids. And probably by 2020 or so, in the early 2020s, we will become collectively one of the larger public school systems as a whole in the United States. And again, I think collectively, but you know, within Houston, within Dallas, within Chicago, within Oakland, within Newark, within Philadelphia, within Atlanta, we want to chase a tipping point in those communities, which means whether it's 5, 10, 15%, we're trying to grow to that kind of market share. So basically I think for the next decade, the KIPP wants to kind of keep doing what we're doing. It's working, and we're getting more kids to go to and through college. We're going to have 10,000 KIPPers in universities in 2015. We're starting to see school districts start to compete with us. And so for now, keep doing what we're doing. Along the way, again, innovative how. We're going to start to see, right now we put our toe in the water on technology and blended learning. We can do a lot more of that. We see happening what Khan Academy talks about, and flipping the classrooms. There's going to be a lot more of that happening as we need to remain on the cutting edge of what is great teaching and how to leverage more interesting tools to allow great teaching to happen. So there will be more of that. And I think our leadership training program will continue to expand as well. That we're going to continue to train not just KIPP leaders, but other traditional district leaders to start to compete with us. And ultimately, you know, and then there's the international work. And I said people have been knocking on our door asking for us to train them as well from other countries. And we've been doing that, and I said in India, Israel, Mexico, South Africa, Brazil, soon. And so, you know, ultimately, and we can do that for people to learn what we do and start their own KIPP-inspired school or series of schools in their country. But we're not going to scale that. So ultimately, what I want to try to figure out on the international front is not just how to replicate KIPP schools, but how you replicate the KIPP school leadership program, how you replicate KIPP Foundation. The other way to think about it, the way Ensino Brazil is part of the Teach for All network around the world, I think there needs to be a similar Lead for All network. That basically, as more of these young teachers who are finding the ability to make an impact, what pathway can they go on in their countries or can scale? They don't have to go halfway around the world to Houston, Texas. Where can they go in their country to continue to learn, need to learn, to be able to grow as a teacher and grow as a leader, to be able to have transformative results in their community? And I think that's what I want to try to help figure out how to replicate.
One final question. Temos que pegar un avión para Salvador, entonces.
É rápido.
Boa tarde. Olha, como todos aqui, sou também admiradora das Charter School e eu sou consultora na Fundação Lema. E a respeito aqui de formação de líderes pedagógicos de escola, a Fundação Lema tem um trabalho em parceria com as secretarias de educação, né, para desenvolver gestores, diretores de escola e técnicos de secretaria, tendo assim como uma metodologia fazer com que as atividades que esses cursistas têm que desenvolver envolvam toda a sua equipe, de maneira que o que é trabalhado teoricamente tenha que ser levado e discutido com as equipes docentes. E neste ano nós começamos uma nova linha de trabalho diretamente com os professores, que envolve técnicas didáticas, tendo como base o livro Aula Nota 10, do Braudel, e nós trabalhamos com redes de ensino público. Neste ano foram 300 professores que passaram por essa capacitação, e durante esse período os professores têm aulas, né, periodicamente aprender e estudar essas técnicas, e depois as formadoras ou os formadores visitam as escolas, visitam as salas de aula, observam as aulas dos professores e dialogam com eles no intuito de melhorar essas aulas. Os resultados foram muito positivos neste ano e isso deverá ser ampliado daqui para frente. E também outra iniciativa da Fundação Lema foi traduzir os vídeos da KnowledgeIs e está desenvolvendo alguns trabalhos de aplicação desses vídeos em sala de aula em algumas escolas públicas da região metropolitana de São Paulo. Então, aqui mais falando com as pessoas que estavam querendo saber de iniciativas que estejam acontecendo aqui no Brasil e que tenham a ver com essa parceria do público-privado e a possibilidade de melhoria do ensino público. E parabenizar aí o Instituto pela iniciativa desse seminário, que é sensacional.
Muito obrigado. Estamos encontro o tempo para pegar um avião. Acho que temos que parar aqui. Muito obrigado pela participação de vocês. E até a próxima.